Damon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it.
Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening, team. It's 8 o'clock and I'm Laurence Fox. Tonight, with the discussion around excess deaths finally not being verboten, I will be looking at the data and discussing the taboo subject further. Then, it's Burns Night, and I will be talking to an actual Scottish person in Scotland about Burns Night life. Then, it's back to the Met. Back in the news yet again for having another and another and another rotten apple in the barrel. The Met Commissioner Mark Rowley has predicted 2 to 3 officers will be in court every week facing charges. Can change come soon enough. And lastly, should the coronation be traditional or reflective of our changing society? David, James Bond, Starkey and Femi Nylander will battle it out. And don't forget, most importantly, I want to hear from you. Send your views my way at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at LozzaFox. That's all coming up after the headlines with Polly Mental hosting.
Good evening. Downing Street says the Prime Minister has never actually paid a penalty to the HMRC amid an investigation into the former Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi's tax affairs. Rishi Sunak's been defending how Number 10 is handling the situation, insisting due process is being followed and saying no issues were raised when he appointed Zahawi to a ministerial role in his cabinet. Well, at a lively PMQs earlier on today, the Labour leader accused Mr Sunak of being too weak to sack the party chairman. Sir Keir Starmer saying an MP who sought to avoid paying tax was not fit to be Chancellor. Mr Sunak has suggested it would have been politically expedient, as he put it, to sack Mr Zahawi. Instead, he awaits the findings of an investigation into the matter. Now, Ukraine's president has called the US announcement of sending 31 Abrams tanks to Ukraine an important step on the path to victory. Germany has already confirmed it would supply 14 Leopard 2 battle tanks to the war-torn country, as well as authorising their re-export from other countries. The Kremlin has described it as a blatant provocation, saying that US tanks will burn like all the rest. President Joe Biden spoke about continued support from Washington earlier, saying the US will train Ukrainian troops to use vehicles as soon as possible.
The Abrams tanks are the most capable tanks in the world. They're also extremely complex to operate and maintain. So we're also giving Ukraine the parts and equipment necessary to effectively sustain these tanks on the battlefield. And we'll begin to train the Ukrainian troops on these issues of sustainment, logistics, and maintenance as soon as possible.
And within the last hour, we're learning that the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has had a telephone conversation with the President of the United States, Joe Biden, as well as the leaders of Germany, France and Italy. He's put out a tweet from his official account saying, good call with POTUS and the other presidents, saying, really pleased they've all joined the UK in sending main battle tanks to Ukraine. And he finishes, we have a window now to accelerate efforts to secure a lasting peace for Ukrainians. Let's keep it up. That tweet from Rishi Sunak within the last hour. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has wished the Ukrainian president a happy birthday. In a tweet, the former Prime Minister said Volodymyr Zelensky's heroic leadership was an example to the whole world. Now, in other news today, hundreds of illegal migrants have been attempting to cross the English Channel today, with GB News exclusively revealing military are patrolling beaches in Kent. GB News has learned around 450 migrants on 9 small boats were intercepted today after a break in the bad weather. Several other small boats, we understand, did attempt to reach the Kent coast but didn't make it into UK waters. A 61-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of assaulting the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock on the London Underground. British Transport Police say they received a report that a man had been harassed at Westminster Tube Station yesterday morning. It's believed the MP wasn't hurt in the incident. The suspect remains in custody and inquiries are ongoing. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News, where now it's time for Laurence Fox.
Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in these excess deaths in petty pace from day to day. It's a shame I don't have a Union Jack or a pair of them hanging forlornly behind me in front of an austere yet comforting set of wooden panels to deliver this. It may have had more gravitas and weight to it that way. Just as when the regime did it, stood stock seriously night after winter night, announcing the daily deaths from, or as it turned out, much more importantly, with the deadly virus. And Mr. Whitty asked for yet another indecipherable side, please, to coerce us into rescinding our liberties, to stop the dreaded Lord COVID in his tracks. And then, as winter turned to spring, doom morphed into determined warmth as rumours that a brand new novel treatment would soon be available to counter the brand new novel virus we were fighting. Coincidences are brilliant, aren't they? The relentless fear porn streamed across our screens daily. But in time, even those messages of death slowly diminished, as did confidence in this miracle cure to combat it. All through these seasons, there remained a stubbornly evil cohort of skeptics who held unspeakable and untweetable heretical views. Ridiculous views like lockdown was the most ridiculous idea in history, serving only to shatter the economy as well as revealing dark echoes of a path towards a sinister authoritarian state power grab not seen in many generations. Or indeed other views, deeply non-neighbourly views, like forcing people to cover their faces with dirty bits of cloth sold by opportunistic state-paid-for witch doctors at competitive prices, would probably have limited efficacy, given the microscopic size and ease of passage through almost any mask known to man. Other fools were denounced for being still stupid enough to criticise the closing down of the entire education system for a bug that children swatted off as easily as a cold, just to save granny. But the worst, the absolute worst of these traitorous sods were the anti-Semites, for voicing concern that the mandating of forced medical procedures upon fellow citizens was not only a violation of the Nuremberg Code, written for far darker times than these, but also a state intrusion into individual rights as dangerous and destabilising as society could possibly be attempted since those darker days. Fortunately, those who delighted in reaching into our lives and grabbing the levers of our autonomy were fought off. And fortunately for us, lest we ever forget, we have the receipts. The calls from those, sadly even ones we thought were on freedom's side, calling for mandatory vaccination of care home workers, for example, doctors, nurses, and again, children. Anyone they could get their hands on to be close enough to jab, gleefully turning you into a pincushion for your own goddamn good. we have those receipts also. And no amount of twisting and turning and rewriting of history can change that. We will never forget. But let's put aside that part of this dreadful international Milgram experiment for a moment, shall we? And deal with the data, which isn't screaming at you from every media channel and front page like it did in the dark old days. Excess deaths reached nearly 3,000 last week and haven't been this high since the so-called second wave of the so-called pandemic. This is agreed fact, which leaves us with one very uncomfortable truth. If the number of extra deaths of people dying now is in the same ballpark as the number of dying when we locked the entire country down and society was all but stopped, then not only did none of the ridiculous measures put in place by this pitifully poor excuse for a government make any difference, but it also means that if we just carried on as normal, never declared a pandemic, and got on with our lives, nothing would have changed. Absolutely nothing. We wouldn't have wrecked the country or be facing inflation and a cost of living crisis that this pathetic regime and its bought and paid for media hacks are so desperate to conveniently blame on the war in Ukraine. Anyone who pretends otherwise, with the data now available, is a fraud. 3,000 extra individual lives a week lost. 3,000 bereaved families. Where's their wall of remembrance, Sadiq Khan? Oh yeah, you parked that one, and now you're conjuring up a new made-up figures to say that just turning on the ignition of your car will kill a child. Perhaps the acid rain soon to dissolve us all will wash away your wall of lies and deceit. Yes, people died, yes, their lives mattered, as each does. But you, Sadiq Khan, you politicised death in an inexcusable way. Every lost life become another opportunity to steal from the free and give to the fearful, and we have the receipts. And yet still, when the media report on this entirely predictable scenario and the now completely unfit for purpose National Health Service, they will ooh and ah about statins. Another big day for pharma, isn't that one a surprise? Ambulance delays, missed cancer diagnosis, anything and everything except that miracle cure. The one which brought Wimbledon tennis together in standing ovation to the inventor of, now quietly withdrawn from use. When we read about the aftermath of COVID, there is no media attention of the so-called vaccine and the dark part it played in this play. It is obvious that any catastrophe is the product of a multitude of terrible decisions combining to create it. It is obvious that for a great many, they were just trying to do the right thing. And it is obvious that it is easier to fool someone than convince them they have been fooled. But if these deaths don't give you pause, if these lost lives don't matter to you as much as the ones saved during this catastrophic failed public health experiment, if there is no compassion in your heart for the growing list of the vaccine harmed, if on reflection you can't see why some of us fought so bitterly for an open and honest debate over the issue, not just for ourselves and those we love, but for you and those you love, then all you are is a vessel of false virtue, a walking shadow, a poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. COVID was a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. But before anything else, we wanted to ask you, on an unrelated note, is the royal family trying too hard to be wokey and inclusive-y? Email your views at GB News or tweet GB News or me at Lozo Fox. So, with 50,000 excess deaths in Britain last year, the vast majority of which not COVID-related, it's strange that the government, who are usually knee-deep in inquiries, reports and commissions, are yet to even launch an investigation. Let's get knee-deep in the numbers with statistician, formerly of the ONS, Jamie Jenkins. Good evening, Jamie.
Good evening, Laurence. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Why has there been no investigation into the excess deaths, do you think?
Well, that is quite puzzling, I think. If just to start from scratch, I suppose, so what excess deaths are is you can look at how many deaths you can see in the country in any particular week. And we tend to look at the pre-pandemic weeks now just to see what you've got. But part of the explanation, Laurence, there's a lot of explanations that need kind of deciphering all of this. We're not going to get a conclusive answer here, but part of the explanation is we're in 2023 now. We're still comparing to, say, an average over the 2015 to 19 period. So if we take the last month, because there's been quite a large number of excess deaths the last month, we've seen about 11,000 more deaths in the last 4 weeks than what we saw over that average period of 2015 to 2019. Now, we do have a large cohort of people born after the Second World War, post-war baby boomers, hitting 75, 76, 77-year-old. That's where they would die. More of those means you'd expect more deaths. So of that 11,000 that we've seen the last 4 weeks, Laurence, about 4,000 of that is explained by this kind of demographic shift. That still leaves a massive number of 7,000 excess deaths in the last 4 weeks. And if we tot up 2022 and look across the year there, and it was a tale of two halves. We saw deaths below average up to about week 18, and then from week 19 up to the first 2 weeks of 2022, you're talking 23,000 deaths now. And I think you're right. The government and Rishi Sunak, Steve Barclay seem to be rather silent on this, as if let's not discuss what's going on. Let's ignore it. We used to get that daily press conference, what's going on with the number of deaths within 28 days of a COVID test. But this one doesn't seem to be anything they want to touch and talk about.
And exactly. Well, first of all, I'd like to ask, did anything happen, particularly between week 18 and 19 of 2021?
Well, nothing. Well, I suppose that starts when you start looking at, the NHS will be one factor in all of this. You can't divorce that. You're probably not going to explain everything, but you start looking at the NHS performance. It was in May 2021 we saw the ambulance kind of call outs for most life-threatening calls started worsening, but they got even worse in 2022. And let's just explain the numbers there, just as an example, that they got a 7-minute target. If you have a phone for an ambulance because you're literally on the floor, practically dying, there's a 7-minute target to get to you. And they were pretty much hitting all of that. But then we went through the back end of 2021 and 2022, and December's figures, shocking in England, it's close to 11 minutes now. That 7-minute target, you're going to be dead before the ambulance comes. It's 12 minutes in Wales. Now, we also know, Laurence, if you look at heart procedures and people waiting for heart treatment, then that's been linked to some of these excess deaths. The number of patients on the waiting lists for kind of heart treatment has increased 50% since before the pandemic. So you talked a little bit in your monologue about shutting the country down. Well, the NHS did kind of put to one side all of these treatments, and that policy itself will be causing some of these deaths. And because of not just the heart treatment issues, all the other things that have built up, which means more and more people are going to A&E because they stayed away, they were told to protect the NHS. That means the system's all clogged up as well. So even if you go there, the chance of you getting a bed is pretty much, at record levels, non-existent in terms of your delay. So that will be a big factor in all this. That was the thing that did change around week 18 and 19 of last year, and it has been getting worse and worse and worse.
So, but what I think will probably get on people's goat, and what they really want to know is such a perceptible overreaction to the pandemic and such an underreaction to these lives. And, we live in a world where apparently, it just saves one life. We must do something. But these lives seem to matter less. Why do you think that is?
And that is the puzzling thing on all of this, because understanding what is going on, because for me, is this the new normal that we're talking about now? We're getting these every week. So is 2023 just going to be every single week excess deaths, more than what you'd expect, after accounting for all of these demographic shifts? Now, there's going to be some people obviously probably shouting at the telly and will be talking now and saying, well, there's excess deaths in other countries, and all I've been talking about is the NHS, and we don't have the NHS in other countries. Now, there will be disruption to healthcare. I'm sure in other countries there would have been people who were staying away in the lockdowns. So there will be some of that. But I think if you start looking at it, some people I think will mention, for example, that COVID itself, you have a COVID infection, that can lead to complications in the longer term. Now, some studies are suggesting that. Some other studies are suggesting that's not the case. So there's some confusion there. And then the vaccination rollout, which I think you were talking about in your monologue, now that raises a lot of confusion as well, because...
Yeah, could I just ask, can I raise the elephant in the room there? To what extent do you think that the vaccine injuries might contribute to these excess deaths?
Well, we do know that people have died from vaccination. This has been broadcast on GBNews. Now, the official numbers suggest that there's only 60 have been linked to vaccination. Now, if you think that The age groups where we're seeing this excess, Laurence, is from about week 19. We are seeing an elevated risk in people aged 35 to 54. It's about 8 to 10% above what you'd expect. Now, they didn't really have any vaccinations over this period. The vaccination rollout for them pretty much stopped as of January. So the next question is, are these effects of delayed reactions to the vaccines in terms of longer term impacts? Now, if you look at Sweden, they've got a higher proportion of their population who have been vaccinated than the UK, and they've got very little excess deaths at all. Now, Germany have got high excess deaths, but when you look at the age groups there, there's fewer deaths in the age groups 40 to 59, completely opposite to what you've got in the UK.
I think we're sort of agreeing that the whole thing is a very complex picture with you know, but we're leaving out the vaccines, in my view, in terms of looking at it. Anyway, thank you, Jamie, for being calm and measured and talking us through that. That's Jamie Jenkins, statistician and formerly of the ONS. Coming up next is Balance Night. Break out the haggis and deep-fried iron brew. Back in 3.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Aye. Fight ye may die. What's the rest of the speech? Run, and you'll live at least a while. But dying in your beds many years from now, would you trade all the days from this day till then for one chance, just one chance, to be on GB News and talk about Burns Night? I am joined by GB News' Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Tony, where are you? What's happening?
Slange to you, Laurence. I'm here in Glasgow at the Dockyard Social, where one of many, many Burns Ceilidhs are happening tonight. There's got our haggis, we've got our whiskey. It's a good night to be Scottish.
What's haggis made out of?
Oh, so we've, a lot of people say it's awful, and, it's technically the truth, but mainly because it's using up various parts of the pig, including things that you're not going to pick off of a Waitrose shelf anytime soon.
And tell me, well, surely Rabbi Burns should have been cancelled by now, shouldn't he?
Listen, see you, Jimmy, I'm telling you straight, the fight against Robbie Burns over the last 5 years, I mean, this year obviously there's the links to the slave trade, but no, we're definitely standing behind our bard. He's still Scotland's favourite son, and to be honest, I think we should just let sleeping men rest.
So what is Burns Night all about for us lot down here? What are we celebrating here?
So today is the Bard's birthday. Earlier today I reported from Alloway, which was his birthplace museum. And Burns Night is celebrating the life and times and memory of Robert Burns. And the recent moves to, add a black mark against his name, it's not just him that those kind of attacks sort of put a mark against. It's his legacy. Who else around the world, when you think of a Scottishman, doesn't think of Rabbi Burns? Burns is intrinsic with the Scottish culture, and these kind of statements, well, I think were made in the best of intentions. When you actually look deeper, on this instance precisely, Burns never even went to Jamaica for a job on a plantation. His poems started gaining some traction here in Scotland, and like a lot of men before him, he had a choice, and his choice was quite simply to go to Edinburgh instead, and he married his sweetheart Jane Moore, and the world 260 odd years later, I would say, is all the better for it.
I've got two very, very important questions for you. The first one is, are you wearing a kilt?
I'm not, I'm afraid, but I'll tell you something. I didn't really fancy, because I knew if I was wearing a kilt there would be 3 questions. I'm a real Scotsman, and I don't think we're quite before the watershed just yet. And the second one being that I'm getting married this summer, and I'd rather test that theory out then.
Good man. And do you have a favourite bit of Rabbi Burns to quote to us, to lead us out from the wonderful atmosphere that you're in?
I have some on my phone. I feel like I'm absolutely cheating myself as a Scotsman.
Are you a fake Scotsman? What do you mean you got it in your phone?
Oh,
I can quote Shakespeare at you all day, love.
I should... Oh, come on. I know it's been... I spoke to a real interesting lassie yesterday, and, she made the very good point that it's a big part of our lives as children, but as we grow older, it's not really until we go older a wee bit more. But my favourite poem, just to read, I couldn't quote it by heart, is obviously Tam O'Shanter, where Tam rides his faithful steed Meg over the Brigadoon, just for the witches to tear off her tail at the 11th hour.
Well, I had no idea what the last sentence you said meant, but thank you very much, Tony. Up in Scotland land, coming up, more disturbing numbers of officers in the Met appearing in court in the coming weeks. Why has this been allowed to happen, and how can it be stopped? Does the Met need Met zeroing by 2030?
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, I'm going to put my bad Scottish accent away for the rest of the show. Welcome back. Before we go to my next guest, I asked you earlier, is the royal family trying too hard to be woke? Remember to email your views at gbnews.uk or tweet gbnews or at LozzaFox. A Twitter user said, yes, modernisation is good, just not too much of it, please. Exactly. You've got to be a little bit diverse, equitable and inclusive, but not too much because it makes everyone want to be sick. Anne says, not sure woke is the right word. Weak is more like it. Oh, he doesn't know. Yeah. Jimmy says, so everything you disagree with is woke then? No, I like disagreeing with people. I just don't like disagreeing with people who refuse to engage with you. They just go, you're wrong. That's what I think woke is. It's like, you're wrong, I'm not going to engage with you. It's like, can we have a discussion? Disagreement is the opposite of woke. If only the woke would disagree, we'd have something to talk about. Jean says, yes, yes, and definitely yes, way too woke. They're losing their support to continue to exist. We want to see backbone and stamina. We do. And that Habsburg chin, I miss that. Pete says, what, visiting schools, old people's homes, veterans and hospitals, that's woke? No, Pete, we're talking about the fact that he's trying to have a diverse, equitable and inclusive coronation, which is like giving in to that part of the people that don't like the nations. And let's face it, guys, is there anything less diverse than the royal family? A hereditary monarchy? Well, Right, now, up to 3 Met Police officers will appear in court each week, brilliant, over the next few months, facing criminal charges linked to dishonesty, sexual offences, violence or domestic violence. The Met is said to be making progress with removing hundreds of corrupt officers currently serving in the force. In the midst of this scandal, of course, it now makes sense that they'll be hiring 3,000 more officers in a panic after firing a bunch of sex offenders and hiring them with the same dodgy process. Here with me to talk this through this madness is former divisional commander in the Met Police, Di Davis. Di, good evening.
Hello, Laurence. Nice to see you.
You too. Has this been a long time coming?
Well, it has been coming since the Met Police was formed in 1839. Unfortunately, there's a barrel, and it's been leaking a little of late. Some pretty rotten apples. But we have to remember there's over 130,000 officers, men and women, in this barrel, and we're talking relatively still small numbers. Nobody excuses the kind of monster that we've seen, or monsters that we've seen of late. And I think we need to put it in some kind of perspective. That's what I'm saying.
But if we're suddenly going to hire 3,000 new ones, shouldn't we not sort of update our background checks and stuff for new officers?
Oh, absolutely. When I joined, my home had a visit, the sergeant came, my parents were vetted. I think even when I got married some 50-odd years ago, my wife's details and her family had to be vetted. That's how far we haven't come, and clearly something's gone horribly wrong. And as well as asking questions of so-called corrupt officers, we need to ask questions of those incompetents at every level who have allowed this system to perpetuate, whether it's the fact we got rid of 20,000 in the last X amount of years and we've quickly tried to recruit. And let's face it, we recruit from the public, but we deserve better. You and I deserve better from men and women who join the police, the Met and others. But, you know, also I would say, look at the 650 MPs. If we're going to throw fingers and point fingers at police officers, let's actually look how many MPs have been arrested for sexual offences. How many of them have been put in prison over the last 10 years? And this commissioner is playing with figures, I'm afraid. And this due process too. Nobody in this country is guilty until found guilty. And to actually say, I'm going to put 2 or 3 corrupt officers, great if he's got the evidence. I want to see that evidence and what charges out of so many so-called there are. And I think he's had to correct some of his figures. So you talk about woke, I think this is a woke commissioner.
Do you think it's a woke police force? Do you think it's a politicised police force? Do you think we need to take the politics out of policing and return to policing without fear or favour?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. That's when I joined back in the late 60s. We didn't have a lot of this nonsense. But what we had was captains who'd been to sea. They'd been throughout storms. Unfortunately now, we have a number of chief officers who, frankly, you wouldn't put in charge of a rowing boat, let alone a chief constable in charge of a force. There's something fundamentally wrong. And I've said on a number of occasions now, 1960 was the last time we had a royal commission. We need a royal commission to define exactly who should lead the police force. And I'm afraid to say woke-like have been, in many cases, selecting woke. And that's been going on virtually since I've retired, if I'm sorry to say.
Well, that's very interesting, and thank you very much for joining me. Good evening. Coming up, do you want the traditional pomp and pageantry, or should the monarchy keep up with the times and reflect our wonderfully diverse, equitable and inclusive society? Find out after the break.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m, join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello. We now move on to the Pride of Britain, King Charles's coronation. The date and schedule has been announced for May this year. The last coronation was for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, all the way back in 1953. Back then, not much had changed to the ancient tradition, apart from the idea to televise the event for the whole Commonwealth to watch. But come on, it's 2023, so we've got to make it worthy in some way to justify the amount of money being spent on plonking a crown on someone's head. A royal source told the Daily Telegraph the coronation needed to be majestic but inclusive. I love it. To reflect a diverse and modern Britain. And for a modern Britain, it's not enough to have a coronation filled with pomp and ceremony, steeped in historical tradition. No, they've got to add a fleet of singers who truly represent this country. So bring on the best of British refugees, NHS and LGBTQ++ LMNOP. Now that makes me proud. The big question is, do we really need a diverse coronation? And does the idea of diversity, equity and inclusivity fundamentally oppose what it means to be royal? David, the royal family isn't very inclusive. Is it?
Odd. I mean, do you know, even somebody as dim as Prince Harry realised that it was a hierarchy. You know, there's actually a hierarchy in this thing, that you're not born free and equal if you're royal. It's a complete antithesis of that. It's also, in one sense, the antithesis of modern. It is the embodiment, literally, of our history. Now, I happen to think that history is also the basis of modernity. In other words, past and present aren't separated, and the whole act of monarchy, the Queen dies, the King succeeds, the seamless transition is exactly how change should happen and should be embodied in the coronation. I mean, my problem is that it all sounds as though it's going to be a bit like the Jubilee concert, or still worse, the opening of the 2012 Olympics, you know. It's going
They were really popular. The public loved those. You can't be that
but you know, it died. It looks now a mockery. This wonderful thing called the NHS. What are they going to do?
We're talking about the coronation.
Are we going to have doctors and nurses prancing up the aisle of Westminster Abbey?
Give them ideas.
When they've all gone on strike.
Femi's turn now.
When they've all gone on strike.
I agree.
You see, isn't it rather awkward?
Can Can we let...
Of course, of course.
Femi, can I ask you a question? How can you make, a hereditary monarchy diverse?
I mean, well, you can't, one, really. I mean, the reality is the royal family is... the one way you could make hereditary monarchy diverse is for someone within that monarchy to marry someone who was not white, which happened, and look at the huge amount of backlash that has had. Racially diverse or other types of diverse. You could have trending...
Diverse is kind of, I mean, I hate to say it, I've said it on BBC before, it's kind of boring. Like, diversity is in here, it's not on here.
Actually, chaps, just to interrupt quickly, the monarchy is so far ahead of us. Do you actually realise that 2 of the sons of Edward III, back in the 14th century, married families of Muslim descent? In other words, the king has actually got a right to be caliph. Quite seriously, they marry the daughters of Pedro the Cruel, who on one side of his family is of Muslim descent and Jewish descent. But can we be serious
We've
now?
got to let Femi.
The reality of the matter is, the monarchy as an institution is, as has been said, in many ways representative of modern Britain, but that's not necessarily a good thing to have an institution which is representative of hierarchy, representative of having someone be seen as being better than someone else simply by virtue of which family they're born into and where within that family they're born into. The royal family, up until, I think, the 1960s or 70s, refused to let ethnic minorities work in front-facing roles in Buckingham Palace. It was a policy which was shown through documents to be an active policy saying we're not letting ethnic minorities work in...
That's the 70s, we're 2023.
Well, the 70s is between these 2 coronations. So if we're harking back to the 50s, if we're harking back to the last coronation and saying things need to be as they were traditionally, then we're harking back to before the 70s. Tradition changes. One of the main things that Conservatives will say is that in order to change, we have to preserve. We have to cling to tradition in order to make actual change. The tradition of the monarchy used to be to cut off the monarch's wife's heads. The tradition of the monarchy...
You have a very funny view of history. Just one second. You've actually made a completely sound point, except you've got it the wrong way round. Real Conservatives, like Disraeli, believe that this is a progressive country and that there has to be constant change. That's what real Conservatives... You're talking about reaction. I'm not a reactionary. Laurence isn't a reactionary. We're Conservatives. We believe in real change, and to preserve, you need to change, but you need to change it in accordance with tradition. Now, the problem with your position to begin with... Sorry, I shouldn't be pointing. It's rude. I apologise. Just habit. The problem with your position to begin with, saying we shouldn't have hereditary or whatever, means... we shouldn't have a monarchy at all. Now, if you were honest, what you would be saying is you'd much rather there wasn't a king and much rather there wasn't a coronation. Isn't that true?
I'd much rather there wasn't a king and I'd much rather there wasn't a coronation.
Right. Then why are you here to comment on the coronation?
Well, because there is a king and there will be a coronation and it will be watched by a load of people. To say that I personally am not a monarchist doesn't mean that whether or not... When this event occurs, when the Diamond Jubilee occurred, when the Queen's funeral occurred, it still has consequences. It's still something which happened. Football games were cancelled. If I was a Man U fan, I'd still be annoyed whether I'm a Republican or a monarchist. Yes, there is an extent to which part of this is a PR exercise, because the monarchy has had a lot of controversy as of late around issues to do with it not being progressive enough, it not being...
sorry, can I just interrupt there a second? It seems to me that the monarchy have said absolutely nothing, whilst 2 attention-seeking media hounds have just berated and diminished and demolished it. I mean, you were talking earlier about having a more progressive monarchy and, you're inviting... We keep talking about Meghan Markle's race, but, this whole idea of the fact the monarchy has remained stoic while it's been attacked and attacked and attacked. I think any British person...
The monarchy has said plenty of things over the years. Princess Michael of Kent was known to go into a bar in the States and say, go back to the colonies, to a bunch of African-American diners. Prince Philip told students in China, if you stay here too long, you'll get slitty eyes. As I say, the monarchy has made plenty of comments over the years which can allow me to say that members of the royal family perhaps don't have the best attitude to people of colour.
Or human beings don't.
They've the attitude of their own times. Philip was born virtually with the century, and of course, older people use different languages. And it just seems to me to be unnecessarily this-centred, now-centred, to demand that they change. But can we again just make a point seriously? The monarchy actually seems, to a dangerous extent, to trying to accommodate itself to people like you. The problem is that, as far as I can see, people with your attitudes, the problem is that wokeification appeals to people who don't want the monarchy. You've already admitted this. In other words, the monarchy is forgetting those who really do support it, which I would say is the great solid mass of the British people, and instead it's trying to appeal to those who don't. Do you know what it's doing?
Let me ask David a question.
Okay, good.
If it's the case that people from different generations who use different language shouldn't apologise for it, why did you apologise? I'm one of those damn blacks that was referred to in this video a while ago, and you apologise.
I apologise. Right, let me explain. I apologise. Of course, I'm perfectly happy to.
But I wanted to talk about the coronation.
Just one second. I'm hugely... Lawrence, please, just one second. I'm hugely happy to explain. I apologised because I used a stupidly wrong word in the wrong context.
And is that what Prince Philip did when he said
no, Prince Philip was using a different kind of language. I, as somebody who's usually in absolute control of language and understand it, because I was tired, because I was irritated, because I thought the fact that we were getting into this stew, this BLM stew about the murdering of a policeman in America. Our policemen don't murder here. They don't murder blacks. They don't murder anybody. They don't arrest enough people. But let's get back to the really important thing. The point I made was you appeal to the woke and you're appealing to those who don't want monarchy. It's a contradiction and it's an absurdity and it's a PR nonsense.
Young people are turning against the monarchy.
Well, they've already turned against it. They've already turned against it.
Not necessarily.
For good reason. Young people are turning against the monarchy because they don't want an archaic institution which represents hierarchy, which represents colonialism.
Well, then the only thing to do is abolish it.
Someone on a crown with a huge, big diamond from India calling themselves the Empress of India, saying they're king of the world.
Can I ask you a question, Femi? A good faith question. Does that massive history, which is admittedly held together, like you say, by a hierarchical system which is passed down to generation, does that not also come with it some benefits? Some benefits in the development of language, in the passing on of wisdom, in the development of culture. Now, we have hit a woke wall, seemingly, in culture, but is there nothing to be taken from the past? That we can actually go, you know, this is a real bonus.
But not necessarily from this institution.
But once again, it is the embodiment of English freedom. Look, what the king... Yes, listen to me. What the king is going to do, he's going to swear in the key section underneath the flummery that you call it, he's going to swear 3 oaths. And these oaths are the basis of your freedom and my freedom. The first oath is that he will govern according to the laws made in Parliament. The second is that he will keep peace between his people and the church, and the third is to do justice in truth and mercy. Now, this is what the coronation is about and should be about. But Laurence, just one second. Laurence, please just let me finish. And then I'm perfectly happy to shut up because I've said all I want to say. What the coronation should be about is saying that those 3 things, the idea of justice, you're talking about the Metropolitan Police, it's in ruin. The idea of governing according to Parliament has been wrecked because we are ruled by SAGE and we're ruled by specialist committees. And our people, as our guest has been illustrating brilliantly, are at each other's throats. What the monarchy should be doing is using this weight of power, the power of symbolism, of history and tradition, to say we need to look afresh at how we are governed. There is a terrible, terrible problem. The coronation, rather than being an occasion for simply frivolity and nonsense and prancing NHS nurses, should be about addressing these utterly fundamental issues which our politicians won't, and with the weight that attaches to the institution, the king could say, this needs doing.
It's a lot of fancy...
Can I ask you a question, Philly? Is there anything positive that you can take out of the coronation and briefly out of this? Is there something you'd like to see that would...
Let's look at it realistically. There's this double standard going on. The history of the monarchy is a history of absolute power.
Rubbish! Rubbish! It's wrong!
Let me finish. It's a history of... Today, when we look... Exactly. So when we look today at the regime of North Korea, and we look at hereditary power being handed from father to son, to father to son.
That's a republic.
We say
That's a
horrific.
republic.
We say that
Get it right.
be
Get it, it's a republic.
Yeah, the coronation, you're talking about monarchy, and I'm trying to answer the question.
It's a very simple. You can answer it yes or no.
I'm answering it in a roundabout way.
Anything positive?
As has Mr. Starkey been doing. Mr. Starkey hasn't been getting directly to the point. He's been talking around, and allow me to talk around.
Forgive me.
Yes, when you have hereditary power, when we see that in other parts of the world, it's dictatorship. It's awful. What we've had in the UK is now they're supposedly symbolic. Now they supposedly don't have any real power. After the English Civil War, the monarchs were brought back after we cut off Charles I's head, brought back in a symbolic way. So supposedly, on one hand, it's all symbolic and they don't have any real power, so we're not a dictator, this, that, the rest. On the other hand, supposedly, they do have a power and they secure our freedom. This is an institution which represents someone ruling the country and ruling other countries, Jamaica, New Zealand, Australia, because of who their father was. That's the base of it. My father was this... Oh, mother in this case, yes.
I mean, all I have to say is this could go on all night, and there's a lot of meadly little manoeuvrings from both of everybody. Anyway, thank you very, very, very much to my guests, Dr. David Starkey and Femi Lionanda. Right now, quickly, it's time for Fox on the Spot. Let's hear what you've got to ask me. Tesla says, what are you having for dinner? Oh, you saw my tweet about my dinner last night. Can someone find me a wife? Thank you. Carol said, where did your tie go, Laurence? It popped up for a day and then disappeared. You can blame Cass. She's over there. She's doing bad, Cass. Sharon asked, can I call you a foxy bear? Only if you marry me. And that was Fox on the Spot. Keep sending them in. Your views at gbnews.uk. Thank you to all my guests tonight, and thank you for joining me. Up next, it is the glorious Dan Wootton. Dan, what do you got for us?
Good evening, Laurence. Great show. We've got lots coming up today, actually. Catherine Birbalsingh, why has she quit as the government's social mobility czar? She'll be revealing all. Plus Tom Bower on the latest pressure that King Charles is coming under when it comes to Harry and Meghan. And Lady Victoria Harvey. She is, of course, the ex-girlfriend of Prince Andrew, but also remains his biggest defender. Now, she thinks the narrative is shifting around Prince Andrew, especially after Charles Moore, the former Daily Telegraph editor, wrote that front-page column in his old newspaper saying that he thinks Prince Andrew may be innocent. So we'll be hearing from Lady V about all of the evidence that she's picking up from Alan Dershowitz on what is becoming a fascinating and intriguing case, Laurence.
That sounds absolutely amazing. I can't wait to see it. Thank you to all my guests tonight, and thank you to you for watching. And stay with Dan because he's a legend. See you later. Tomorrow.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast. Rain quickly clearing southern areas for the next few hours, and then we've got a patchy frost developing tonight, but that will lead to plenty of sunny spells through Thursday. Looking at the bigger picture, high pressure still dominates the weather pattern. This front clears south over the next few hours. Then we're looking at a largely dry day as we head through the day on Thursday, thanks to that area of high pressure. Through the evening time, that rain just clearing the far south and then